From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Tiger Cats Game Day with Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly.
Welcome to another episode of Tiger Cats Game Day on the Ticats Audio Network. My name is Courtney Stephen, as always, joined by my main man, Mike Daly. Mike, the 3-7 Hamilton Tiger Cats traveling down the QEW to face the 4-5 Toronto Argonauts. Does that sound familiar?
Isn't it crazy when you start looking at the East Division? And you know what? It's actually, I know this is like panic mode for everybody in the East because you're like, oh, we're all losing so much. But my gosh, isn't it just a disaster going on in the East Division? And I mean, good thing, right? Because that puts the Ticats in a good position while they're trying to figure out all of this different stuff. But I'm sure Toronto and Montreal are saying the exact same thing. It's just, hey, listen, good thing the East is terrible because we all kind of have a shot at this still.
And it's almost a battle to see who's got the cleanest dirty shirt right now. But it doesn't really matter how you get there. As long as you can punch a ticket to get to the playoffs, you give yourself an opportunity to just have a chance to dance for that shiny gray cup. Now, the Ticats, they are in third place currently in that Eastern Division. They are 1-1 against the Argos this year, heading into the second half of this quadruple header that they are playing. So it will be an exciting game. Lots to unpack here. But before we get into that, Tiger Cats fans, it's time to ride on our strength. From now until October 13th, purchase 4 eligible Hercules passenger or light truck tires to receive a $100 Ticats reward card and be entered to win our road trip sweepstakes. Available at participating Active Green and Ross Ontario locations or visit HerculesTires.com/AGR rewards. Now, nice. Mike, this is a team that we've been watching for 10 games now, and the lineups, this may be some of the most changes that we've seen from any week to week. This has been quite the shakeup. Of course, Simone Lawrence out of the lineup. Kyle Wilson, who's been playing very well this season, he's in. Last week, we saw 2 new corners at either spot. Not necessarily new guys to the team, but it was Des Lawrence, it was Alden Darby. This week, we're going to see Jamal roll back at his boundary corner spot. And a new Randall Jr. coming over from Montreal to play on that field corner in replacing Ciante Evans. There's just a lot of shakeup all over the place. But talking about this defense, how do you think it will be for Randall coming in here, brand new, fresh off the street? He's probably ain't even put his laundry loop through the laundry 3 times yet. He's the newest kid in the locker room. What's it gonna be like for him coming into this system and being expected to play and perform in less than a week?
Well, I mean, Court, you and I both know the system very well. And, you know, Coach O's system, which is very similar to Mark Washington's system, is not an easy one to just pick up as in coming off the street, right? It's not one of these ones where you come in, it's like, hey, you got that guy, cover him all day, right? Or you might be a low zone every once in a while. That's it. No, it's a lot of adjustments. It's a lot of understanding what's going on around you. So that's tough. I mean, that's really, really tough because to come off the street into a new team and then all of a sudden get thrown in the fire against a Toronto Argonaut team that uses, like we said before, uses that Z receiver, that strong side receiver, more than most teams. So you talk about getting put in the fire, being fresh off the street, and then you're going to see the most targets you'll probably see against any team, right? With Curly Gittins out there. And you have Speedy B lining up out at the wide side receiver. With Randall's head spinning as he's learning this new defense and seeing those footballs coming his way, it'll be tough sledding. But the nice thing, he's a professional. He knows the CFL game, so it's not like it's somebody fresh off the street into the CFL. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do because it's almost like an experiment at this time, right? It's difficult to step in there.
Absolutely. Luckily, he'll be playing next to Richard Leonard, who's somebody who's been in this system for many years. It's his first year after taking a brief stint in Calgary, but he's familiar with the style that they play in Hamilton. Communication is a huge part of what they do because it is so much of a team game. It's not so much mano a mano all the time, but they will rely on each other playing some of those zones and whatnot. So I will be interested to see how he adapts, how he performs. I think some people last week would have pointed to a little bit soft coverage in times when it needed to be a little bit tighter, and perhaps that's why we saw the change. No knock on the players that were in the game, but when you're not winning and the games are tight, there's slight edges and small margins where you can't really afford to make those. And every play of every quarter of every game is more and more important as we get later into the season. So we'll talk a little bit more about the matchups and the key storylines as we proceed. But let's flip to the other side of the ball. Another big name back in the lineup, Dane Evans. Now, Dane, he was out for a couple of games. Matt Shildt stepped in valiantly in his place. He had a 1-1 record during that time. He actually also, Matt Shildt had his first career 300-yard passing game in the loss to Montreal. So he was moving the ball. He was getting some things done. He was creating a spark on the offense. But Dane has been the guy from day one. So now that he is available, he is back in the lineup. He will be throwing the ball to the usual suspects, Stephen Dunbar Jr., Tim White, Keandre Smith, the young up-and-coming star, Lamar Durant, and Poppy White, who will also be doing the return duties in place of the injured Lawrence Woods. How does Dane Evans coming back into the lineup energize this team? Do you think that he is 100% healthy? Do you think that this was the right move? Or is this one of those ones where you can't deny a guy like Dane because he really is the undisputed starter, and when he has a chance to be available, you just put him in?
Yeah, and Court, we talked about this, multiple times. Dane has been playing really well, right? I mean, he's been putting up tons of yards. He's been getting the ball out quick. He's had some bad breaks, especially early on in the season, right? Everybody knows, but what I'm curious about, and maybe you can give me some information on this, because with Matthew Shildt playing so well last game, right? Because when you watch that game, he was impressive. They opened up that playbook for him, and he was dissected. He's throwing the ball around the field to everybody, right? Well, Tim White especially. But is there any sort of leash on Dane at this point? Or is it one of those things, nope, Dane is our guy. Dane's going to get in there. We know what he can do because everybody's seen it. He tears up defenses when he's out there, right? But is there any sort of leash, not because of Dane's play, but because of the injury and how well Matthew Shildt played that last game?
I wouldn't say that there is any different of a leash than there might have been before the injury happened. And if we can remember, this was a two-quarterback offense from the jump. I think this was the first team, because the rule changed, but it's the first team that I ever saw in my professional career that had two quarterbacks on the field. And they did it, honestly, they did it probably about once a game, if I remember, if not twice a game. Sometimes the quarterback would come in and he'd be a runner by design. Other times he'd come in and he'd throw the ball. I remember Matt Shildt caught a ball and he had like 25 yards of yak, if I'm not mistaken.
On that bubble.
Yeah. So definitely Tommy Condell's not afraid to use all of the weapons at his disposal, and that just keeps the other defensive coordinator, Corey Macy's, going to be on his toes. He's going to have to be prepared for everything. Getting into the third of 4 games, I think a few more tricks come out of the sleeve at this point in time, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Matt Shildt under center, or in the CFL, it's more likely to be in the gun at some point in time during this game, but I would not take that as a threat to Dane Evans. Dane is a proven starter in this league. He's been instrumental in bringing this team to back-to-back Grey Cups. So I think that Dane is quote-unquote safe, but it is a performance business, and hey, go out there and throw 10 picks. I'm sure then that guy behind you is going to be warming up before the coach even calls his number. So like let's talk about the other side of the ball too, though. In terms of the Argos, Jaguar Davis, who is a big force up front for the Argos, he will not be in action. But that defense still has been giving headaches to a lot of people. They've been very opportunistic, and between Shane Ray, Oakman, they've been causing some havoc. You also have Enoch Mwamba, Chris Edwards, and Wynton McManus as the linebackers backing them up. You know, Ticats haven't necessarily been running the ball wild. They've ran for more yards than the Argos in their first 2 games, but they haven't been running from the running back position as much as you would hope they are. It's not necessarily in their DNA. They are a pass-first team, but I think in their victories, they've established a run. Do you see this Argos defense as having an edge in this one, or do you think that this is in favor of the Ticats with the lineups just the way that they are?
No, I think when you look at that Argos defense, they are built to stop the run. That's a pretty dynamic defensive line and linebacking group, right? When you look at Chris Edwards, Enoch Mwamba, and Wynton McManus, those 3 have played very, very well. Wynton McManus especially. If you watch him on any of the Argos games, he seems like he's everywhere.
He shows
right?
up.
And then Chris Edwards is always making a play on the ball. Always making a play on the ball. For as much as guys around the league don't like him, he also gets under their skin quite a bit too, right? And that's a good front, 4 plus a 3 linebacker. That's a good front line. So I think it's edge Argos. But where I'm curious to see is when you start to look at losing Jaguar Davis for the Argos. That is a huge, huge impact because you see that he can just completely wreck games when he decides to turn it on, right? And so that's going to be something that the Ticats are going to be happy about, and that, like you said, Corey Mason, that defensive coordinator for the Argos, he's going to be missing him big time because especially if you go and, if we go to that back end of the Argos, right, and move to the DB group, they have been banged up for a few games now, right? They brought in Maurice Carnell, the 4th, who was on the street, former Ticat, to be playing that boundary half position, right? That happens to line up against Tim White, who just has had an unbelievable past couple games. So that's where I think the Ticats will have the edge in that sense, is that receiving group to their DB group. So I think if you're going to look to win on one edge or the other, it's probably through the air as opposed to running the ball.
And through the air instead of on the ground is a theme that the Argos have been going with. Andrew Harris out for the season and AJ Ouellette coming in his place. At the running back position was the leading receiver for the Argos last week, 7 catches, 92 yards. So I think that matchup on the other side with the Ticats D and linebackers versus the Argos running backs, I think also that is in favor of the Ticats. And you got a guy like Cam Kelly, Jovan Santos Knox, and Kyle Wilson. They're sideline to sideline types. And I think when you put a guy like Ouellette, who is talented, you got to give him all of his flowers. But I like the matchup of Cam Kelly, the league leader in interceptions, against Ouellette in space. And I think that will be an interesting one to watch. So let's just talk a little bit more about these trends here. Coming into this game, both teams coming off of a loss. The Argos lost one at Calgary, and then the Ticats, they lost in Montreal. Now, in the season, they've already played twice. 1 win was for the Argos. 1 win was for the Ticats. Now, the stat that Ticats fans are not going to like heading into this one is that the Ticats, in their first 10 games of the year, are 0-5 on the road. Now, They say you got to protect the house and you got to win at home, but you also have to try and at least steal a couple on the road. So this would be an opportunity for the Ticats to break that streak and try to get their first sniff of a W on the road. How is the atmosphere at BMO Field? Do you think that the Argos have turned it around? It used to be almost like a second home game for the Ticats, but what's the difference this year? Is it just that they didn't get the win, or am I overthinking it?
Yeah, I think it's just that they didn't get the win because realistically, when you watch that game on TV, there are more Ticat fans always than there are Argo fans at those games, right? They travel very well, the Ticat fans do, and they pretty much make that a second home game, which the Ticats are going to need, right? Because if whoever ends up getting in that L column this week is behind the eight ball, because now you got to win just to tie up this series. And then it's, especially for the Ticats being one game behind Toronto, it's a must-win game to be able to keep a leg up on this playoff push. But what I want to do is I want to get inside because as a player going through this situation, right, where you're losing a bunch of games, they're close games, but you're still in the playoff. You're still in the playoff push. You still have everything in front of you, really, like the Ticats and the Argos obviously both do. Does that, as a player, change your mindset? Or because you're still in that playoff push, is it really just the same as if you were, an over 500 record? Is there the same feeling in that sense because you're still in it? Or is it, hey, we're losing a lot of games, it's, kind of stressful at this point?
I think it's got to be a blend. It's got to be a mix. It is absolutely stressful. As you can see, the coaches are not just going to sit on their hands and wait for things to improve. There will be shakeups. There will be tests. There will be challenges. People will be brought into the locker room to let you know that nothing is can be taken for granted. Nothing is given away for free. It's always earned. But at the same time, you're motivated and you're telling yourself, man, look at all of these proofs, these details, these moments that show you we are good. We are who we think we are. It's just not happening in the W column right now. So, like, can we please finish? Look at this small thing here that we could have done. Look at that 3 or 4 plays in this game that we could have changed. You could explain your way into being over 500 I'd say for either of these teams, right? So there's going to be a level of confidence that comes with being, like I said, in the race to have the cleanest dirty shirt. But for the Ticats fans or for the Ticats players, I think you take it one game at a time. And that's what I've said before. And I think that's what Coach O, Coach Washington, that's what Tommy, I think those guys are preaching right now, is that regardless of how many points we've scored last week or the week before, Toronto has actually scored 61 points in these first 2 games. The Ticats have scored 54. So the Argos are up by 7 if we're going on aggregate like the soccer fans do. But none of those points matter coming into this one. It's really just about rolling the ball out there, kicking it off, and finishing with more points than the people wearing the other colored jersey tonight. So I think it's going to be a great game. Honestly, the teams, when they're more familiar with each other, the difference in skill level from the guy across from you, it doesn't necessarily count for as much because maybe I could cheat back a little bit. Maybe I could cheat up a little bit. I've seen it before. So I'm giving myself an edge of familiarity. It's one of these ones that I'm just excited about. So here's a couple of numbers, Mike. I want to get your take on this. We're extremely closely matched up in this one. So both teams averaging just over 280 yards passing per game. You would think that the Ticats had an edge in the rushing because they have 114 rushing yards to the Argos 68 in the last 2 games, but the bulk of those rushing yards have actually come from the quarterbacks. And then the points, the Argos have outscored the Ticats in the second, the third, and the fourth quarter, but the Ticats have come out stronger and in aggregate are leading in the first quarter. So there's a lot of back and forth. The key ones that stand out, Ticats have 4 turnovers to the Argos 0, but the Argos have been sacked 6 times, and the Ticats have only given up 2 sacks. Really, there's nothing there outside of the turnovers, which is crucial. There's nothing there that shows me one team has a definite edge in this matchup. Where do you think the difference will be in this game?
Yeah, and those are great numbers because when I listened to that, what I hear is the turnovers is the big one, right? Because the sacks, so offenses always talk about earn the right or reserve the right to punt, right? Be able to roll the punt team out there so that you can turn the field, gain some field position back. So if you get a sack, whether it's first and 10, you get a sack and then you're in a tough situation and then you have to punt after a second and long, or you get a sack on second and long and it turns into, second and 20. You still have the opportunity to punt, have a good punt, have good cover, flip the field a little bit, and then give your defense a chance on a longer field. When you start looking at that turnover margin, those are plays where you don't reserve the right to punt. That ball is picked off, that ball is fumbled, it's picked up by the Argos, whatever it might be, and now that field is short for the Argos offense to go down and score. So defenses can't give up, 1 or 2 first downs and be okay. Those turnovers are really what ends up flipping the field and puts points on the board quickly, right? So those are the numbers I look at big time when you start hearing that, because the other thing I focus on is in the Montreal loss, the Ticats gave up 385 yards to Trevor Harris, right? So when you start looking at these turnovers and the Ticats not getting any turnovers, if quarterbacks are going to put up that many yards in those games and throw that amount of times, you have to pick the ball off. And you saw Cam Kelly do it, right? That's what ended up happening. Cam Kelly made a great play and really kept them in that game because they were going down to score. So that's what I look at, is that this back end for the Ticats needs to take the ball away.
Now, I know we work on a primarily audio platform here. This is the Ticats audio network. But if I could pull up the textbook drop out of the sky coverage that Cam Kelly executed in Montreal to get Trevor Harris for that interception. He was in his own end zone from the Sam linebacker spot, drops back to the deep half of the field. That means he's covering about 30 yards worth of real estate back there, 20 yards deep. And Trevor Harris didn't think that anybody was there. It looked like a blown coverage. And then Super Cam to the rescue, drops out of the sky, pick. Plus, he had about 30 or 35 yards on the return to change field position. Those are the type of plays that break a game open. Now, that could have been a 14-point swing the other way, because I don't remember if they went down and scored, but that was about to be 7, at least 3 points for Montreal. Yeah. So those are the kinds of impact plays that the Ticats have been thirsting for this season. They need to produce a couple of those. And with Lawrence Woods out of the game, I'm looking to the defense, just like you said. Can we see a sack fumble? Can we see an interception? And don't just pick it off, but pick it off and then change the field position. Because Seth Small, he might be my X factor. Inside the 40, he has hit everything that he's kicked. And so it's like the 40 is the new 20, You could just trust it when you get to the 40. It's like a chip in. And this guy, he's got ice in his veins. He hit one late in the last game. It unfortunately wasn't enough. But I'd like to see that Ticats D turn it up, be opportunistic, go for the gusto, and just make some very big game-changing impact plays. Mike, I don't know. Where is the key matchup? Is the key matchup in that defensive backfield for the Ticats somewhere?
Listen, I'm going to go defensive backfield, yes, but not typically what you're going to think, because I'm going to go back to what you said. AJ Ouellette led the team in receptions. So what that tells me is when you're leading the team in receptions, and he was under 100 yards, so I think he's about 92 yards. What that tells me is that McLeod Bethel-Thompson is looking downfield, doesn't see what he's liking. AJ Ouellette is leaking out of the backfield, maybe into the flat, maybe on a curl, whatever it might be. Nice little check down. He catches it, turns up for first downs, right? So what I'm going to look at, and we've talked about this plenty of times, but Kyle Wilson versus AJ Ouellette, because generally where those check downs are, once the running back looks for a blitz, if there's no blitz, he'll release into either out toward the sideline or right over top of the O-line, And you see it all the time. Quarterbacks are looking downfield, don't like what they see. Quick little throw to the running back, and he turns up and gains some yards. That's my matchup, because if Kyle Wilson can come downhill and make those open field tackles, which not just him, but the Ticats defense in general in that Montreal game, we're not great at, that will be my key matchup to watch, and really I think what gets the Ticats off the field on second downs.
That's a great call. That's a great.
What about you,
Coach Daly? You know what? I love that, and I think even to amplify it a little bit more, to prevent him from being able to leak out on those checkdowns, Ticats fans, one thing you can look for is Coach Mark Washington dialing up a blitz on second down that would force Ouellette to stay in the backfield in protection. Sometimes the blitz is simply a called delay where you wait to see if the running back is in protection. If he's in protection, you go force him to protect something. Otherwise, he would have the opportunity to leak out. So adding that fifth rusher and forcing him to hang in, keep an eye out for that one. But where's my matchup? I like to see the man with the hot hand, Tim White, moved around. I want to see him at that too strong to the field, lined up against Deshaun Amos, who came over from Calgary. I played with him back in the days when I was a young whippersnapper in 2019. He's a great halfback. He's opportunistic. He's a guy who goes up and challenges for the ball. But there's a couple of times where he's been caught slightly out of position and he's given up the big one. And so a guy like Tim White, 145 yards on 11 catches, you have to feed that guy. He's hot. And they say that, what you did last week doesn't carry into this week. Well, statistically, no. Literally, no. But the confidence, the dusting yourself off in the morning, looking in the mirror before you leave for the game and just saying, you know what, I can actually do that again today. If I choose to, I could put on my cape, I could put on my hard hat, and I can go for another 140 yards. I think that the way they do that is they move Tim White to the field and they put him on a little bit of that, those double moves, those corner posts, those stop and goes, those sluggos, and I want to see him open that thing up for another 100+ yard game. That would be amazing.
And if you remember, that's exactly the route he ran at Tim Hortons Field when he scored with Matthew Schultz airing it out to him. But
that was
you said young. You said young whippersnapper in 2019. You were an old man playing in the league at that point. And
Definitely.
And now that you're old man, you're going to need some new truck tires. So Ticats fans, it's time to ride on our strength. From now until October 13th, purchase 4 eligible Hercules passenger or light truck tires to receive a $100 Ticats reward card and be entered to win a road trip sweepstakes. Whoa. Available at participating Active Green and Ross, Ontario locations, or visit HerculesTires.com/AGR rewards. Now, Court, let's move on into finally the storylines for this game. When you look at this game at BMO Field, Ticats versus the Argos, battle for the East, what are you looking for?
Well, I think Coach O this year has done a good job with a lot of the key decisions. He's had some timely challenges. He's had some third down tries that, successful or not, I think they were at points where if you hit them, they change the tide and the momentum of the game, especially when you're in the opponent's end. He's really saying, I trust my defense to keep them pinned down here. This is just as good as a punt from the other side of the field into the coffin corner. So I'm going to send my offense back out there for another try on this third down. I think that's the kind of gusto it's going to take in this division battle, fighting for first or second place, because that's what it's going to take to get into these playoffs. Right now, Saskatchewan is 2 games ahead of first place in the East, so they're really the best team in the East if we're talking crossovers. You got to finish first or second. So with the playoff-type atmosphere looming, I think the storyline of this one is when the Ticats inevitably get into that third down situation and they've got to go for it, who makes the play? Who steps up and fights for the extra yard, just bears down to get that reach block, to pin that defensive end, to squeeze that that low ball that's thrown just over the first down marker? Who's going to step up and be the person who makes the big play on third down when it is do or die? I think that's the storyline I'm watching, because there's been a couple of opportunities this year. Some of them they've made, a couple of them they didn't, and I think we can look back and say, oh, these were one of the 3 or 4 plays that we always try to highlight, which changed the tide. But that's the storyline I'd be watching in this one. I don't know if your thought about that, but what are you going to be watching in this one?
Well, and just to add to that, Court, is, I like you heard Coach O after the game talk about going for it on that first drive when they made it all the way down there, went for it on the 3rd 7. Didn't work out, but they ended up pinning Montreal. They had to start on their 7-yard line at that point. And he had told the guys in the locker room, hey, when we get down there, we're going for a touchdown this first drive. I don't care what we do, we're going for a touchdown. And that resonates in the team because everyone's like, yeah, we're here to blow this game open, right? Didn't work out for them, which is fine. But like you said, he's willing to make those calls, and that's going to pan out and work out at some point. But even further is when that defense is on the field and it seems like there's nothing that can be done to stop the offense, right? Because there's going to be a couple drives every single football game when you're on defense where you're just like, nothing's working right now, right? They're kind of getting first down after first down after first down, keeping things in front of us, but it's just not working. Who's going to make a play then, right? You're talking about offense on that 3rd down. I'm looking for someone when you can't slow that drive down and something's going on. Who's going to make that play then? Because that's really, like you said, timely plays is what it's going to be. But realistically, when you look at this game and that storyline, this is to keep the Ticats in a good spot for that playoff push. Because if you let Toronto get too far ahead of you, then it really just becomes a 2-man race between the Ticats and Montreal. Put yourself behind the 8 ball. So that's my storyline, is that, like you said, this is playoffs now, especially in East Division. You have to win this game to be able to be at least 1 up on Toronto going into Labor Day at home, which the Ticat fans will show up for. But that's what I'm looking for, and I'm really looking forward to this game. I think this is going to be a good one.
Man, you said it best. No better way to end it. This sets the table for Labor Day, which already on its own is the biggest game of the year. It doesn't matter what the schedule says. Next to the Grey Cup, that's the one that every Hamilton fan wants to win. And depending on how this goes, it would make for a very interesting Labor Day. 7:30 p.m. tonight, Hamilton goes to the 6 to play against those Toronto Argos. And you will have RJ and Luke on the call as usual. Bubba O'Neill and Andy on the pregame 1 hour before that. And if you can't make it to Toronto to watch the Black and Gold battle the Double Blue, you can always tune in to the Ticats audio network at listen.ticats.ca. Thanks for tuning in, and until next week, have a great game day.
It's game day and you're ready. So are we. Let us know your thoughts. Email us at gameday@ticats.ca. Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly are here every game day with their insights into today's game. Subscribe to the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.